1,050,000, 1,100,000. 5 houses right here, maybe 2 houses right there, you feel me? I do not cap, this is really my lifestyle.
He broke the internet and let it break him back. One moment, a name no one outside Brooklyn could place. The next, a neon bright presence that flooded every timeline. 1 million eyes fixed on a live stream, then 2 million. Clips clipped, shares cascaded, numbers inflated like parade balloons. You could count the views, but you couldn't count the noise. He spoke in volume, not sentences. He understood that attention is a currency, and he spent it like it would never run out. Daniel Hernandez grew up where the pavement remembered boots, sirens, and footsteps that ran because running felt safer than standing still. Bushwick shaped him, then loss hardened him. After his stepfather was a 13-year-old left school to shoulder adult burdens. Work first, dreams later. Later arrived as a stage name that was impossible to ignore. 6ix9ine. The look was calculated, the sound abrasive, the posture defiant. It wasn't just music, it was an alarm clock that never stopped ringing. Gummo cracked the shell and let the spectacle out. A pounding beat, a block mobbed up, and a camera that panned over faces like proof of concept. Every frame insisted on authenticity. Every bar was a dare. Charts rose like mercury in a heat wave. Day 69 punched into the Billboard conversation. Dummy Boy refused to die even when it leaked. Then came the pandemic-era detonations. New singles that vacuumed attention. View counts that broke dashboards. A live stream count that made headlines on its own. The world's most online eyes pointed to a kid from Brooklyn whose colors were louder than his mic. The persona came fully loaded, rainbow hair, face tattoos, a grin that looked like a challenge, cash fanned across tables, cars lined up for the camera, jewelry reflecting the flash like a second sun. He knew the difference between talent and theater and decided to major in both. Ties to a notorious set didn't whisper in the background, they shouted in the foreground. The point wasn't subtlety, the point was certainty. Certainty that if you say you're real and you look real, and you roll with people who look like they make things real, the audience will decide that you are. But the past does not vanish when the spotlight hits. Long before the biggest singles, there was a courtroom and a plea in 2015. A felony, use of a child in a sexual performance. The consequences were laid out. Community service, therapy, an apology letter, and then time moved forward. The internet did what it does, and new images buried old records until they didn't. As the views soared and the voice got louder, those pages resurfaced and demanded to be heard. The dissonance was deafening. The brand that promised invincibility and the paperwork that described accountability. The response was to accelerate, more bravado, brighter sets, bigger stakes, louder claims. The timeline fed on shock, and shock became the business model. The affiliations weren't an accessory, they were an asset. It felt like proof, leverage, aura. It also felt like gasoline. Meanwhile, critics compiled contradictions. Props versus paychecks, posturing versus reality, charisma versus character. The audience grew anyway, because controversy often converts into clicks, and clicks often convert into cash. There is a night that tells you what comes next. A celebration at an upscale restaurant fuses ego, entourage, and friction. The room tightens. Words turn to shouts. Shouts turn to violence. People get hurt. Outside, sounds no one wants to hear in a city midnight punch the air. It reads like a scene from a movie, but it's not. It sits inside a longer investigation already underway. The affiliations that made for gripping videos were the same threads federal agents had been pulling for months. Then the indictment, racketeering, robbery, firearms, conspiracy, the kind of list that does not leave much air in the room. Mandatory minimums stack up like bricks. The horizon line is a prison gate. In the space where a myth either calcifies or cracks, a decision lands with the weight of an anvil. He cooperates, he testifies, he tells the government what it needs to hear about the crew that once amplified his image. The sentence drops from a life-staking number to a handful of years. Early release follows. Freedom returns, but not the same freedom, not the same stage, not the same audience. There is a culture where loyalty is the rule you don't write because everyone knows it already. In that culture, the cooperation sets a label on his name in permanent marker. Memes swarm, collaborations evaporate, venues calculate risk and say no. Even generosity is viewed through the lens of credibility. A six-figure donation can be declined if the brand behind it has burned too many bridges. The internet that once minted his myth now frames it with mocking captions. You can pretend that fallout is temporary, you can't pretend it doesn't cost. Numbers still spike when a single drops, but spikes are not the same as sustained climbs. The industry reads the room remembers and does not forget. The brand regroups around what it can control. New markets, new features, new stunts, new provocations. But momentum is not just speed, it's also direction. Without trust, motion looks like flailing. Behind the camera, another story keeps its own books. The mountain of cash, the endless cars, the diamonds that bounced light across every frame. Critics point out how easy it is to rent an image. A former ally goes public with claims about a multi-million-dollar streaming deal, negotiated and under-delivered. 4 appearances, then silence. Upfront money justified as investment in a content house. The ledger grows heavier, taxes that linger like a shadow, judgments with commas in places that make your stomach drop, unsecured bills that become lawsuits, the polite invoices that turn into stern letters that turn into court orders. Itemized, it looks like a wall taller than pride. Figures circulate. An IRS claim that hits 8 digits, a civil judgment that nearly matches it, 7-figure liabilities from other suits, 6 figures on a property that ran aground, 5 figures promised to a contractor still waiting. Add legal fees, add interest, add the weight of a public image that makes private negotiations harder because the other side assumes you will perform for the camera even in a conference room. There is also the home front, which does not measure in views or units sold. The mothers of his children speak up. They describe support that barely arrived or arrived once and stopped. They paint a picture in which luxury handbags and public cash giveaways took priority over basic necessities for the people most closely linked to his last name. They talk about birthdays without gifts, months without help, visits that never happened. They point to amounts so small over so many years that the numbers convert into a metaphor for neglect. In the crowd, the word deadbeat spreads because the internet loves labels and because accusations about family hit harder than almost anything else. The parade of legal entanglements doesn't stop at the federal case. Smaller but unignorable incidents stack up. A traffic stop years back morphs into a story that echoes across time. Probation becomes a line you can't step over, then a line that gets smudged, then a line crossed. A drug test turns positive with explanations about prescription medication. A judge says 45 days. The door closes. Even short stints echo loudly when they follow a promise to stay quiet. Career pivots arrive as predictably as sunrise. If one market becomes ice, look for heat elsewhere. Songs in another language, features with artists from another scene, videos that repackage spectacle for a different algorithm. But translations don't automatically translate reputation. Albums land with a dull thud compared to the dynamite of old. First week numbers that once felt inevitable now feel aspirational. A project moves 53,000 units where older work raged across the charts. New releases struggle to chart at all. The fan base that defended every chaos now splinters, and a segment that stays does not spend enough to keep the ship afloat. When the IRS comes calling, silence is not a strategy. The claims in the spotlight are that assets went under the hammer, a house, cars, jewelry, even plaques that once symbolized a peak pressed into plexiglass. An auction replaces an unboxing. A wave of posts from strangers celebrating someone else's downfall rushes in because the internet prefers endings it can see. The stacks that once fanned out on video now get itemized in a catalog with lot numbers. There is another pivot that deserves attention because it tells the truth about how far the image had drifted from reality. After years of presenting a life as a luxury showroom, he admits the cash in some videos was not cash. It was a prop, an accessory, part of the set, dressing required to keep the illusion intact. He calls himself an entertainer and frames the deception as performance. The admission is honest and also devastating because it confirms exactly what critics shouted for years. The wealth was a costume, the life a rented suit. Even the attempts to turn notoriety into novelty products backfire. A meme coin with his name becomes another example of trying to alchemize attention into currency. A new record deal announced with a number big enough to grab headlines dissolves when probation rules are violated. The hustle runs headfirst into the walls built by prior choices. If you teach the world to see you as a spectacle, it will treat every business move like a stunt. Strip away the gossip, and a few stubborn facts remain. The climb was rocket fast, and the fall was gravity obeyed. The turning points were not subtle. A conviction that never went away. A series of public confrontations that escalated. A federal case that forced a binary choice. A cooperation that rewrote his place in a culture obsessed with loyalty. What came after was a function of those inputs: resentment from peers, suspicion from brands, caution from venues, fatigue from fans, pressure from courts, and the kind of bills that mature into crises. People who once defended him now write eulogies for a career still technically alive. They remember the thrill of discovering Gummo and the feeling that a weird, loud, impossible to ignore kid had hacked the industry. They lament how the hack became a virus that attacked the host. They recount incidents in the Dominican Republic, airport blow-ups, fan altercations, alleged domestic violence cases and counters, claims and denials, videos staged to shock, talk of faking death for views, the exhausting cycle of outrage and apology and deflection and more outrage. No one expects perfection from a public figure. The demand is simpler growth, responsibility, a willingness to carry the weight of choices. What detonated the goodwill here was not only the original sins, but the inability or refusal to evolve. The apology that reads like obligation rather than understanding. The immediate lunge back into provocation, as if turning the volume up could drown out the past. The use of charity as a PR lever instead of a practice of repair. The ways family obligations were reportedly treated as an afterthought, while public romance and performative generosity took center stage. There is a lesson about loyalty that doesn't require street codes to understand. Teams, whether on a block, in a locker room, or in a studio, are stitched together by trust. Betray that trust, and you don't just lose allies, you lose your context. In the industry that made him famous, the context was everything. Without it, songs sounded flatter, numbers meant less, and the stage looked bigger than the person standing on it. There is a lesson about responsibility that does not end with paying taxes or winning cases. Influence multiplies consequences. Millions watch, millions imitate. When violence is glorified, violence returns. When money is faked for a feed, real people go into debt, trying to keep up. When you present fatherhood as optional, a generation of viewers absorbs the lie that presence is a luxury. The ripple effect turns into a wave that knocks over more than one life. There is a lesson about integrity that no brand consultant can rush. You can buy ads, boost posts, inflate metrics, and still fail to convince. Integrity is cumulative. It grows slowly and shatters quickly. Once broken, it is expensive to rebuild, not in dollars, but in time spent staying quiet and doing the right thing without telling anyone about it. That time never began here. The show kept going because stopping felt like drowning. The irony is that swimming harder in the wrong direction only tires you out faster. There is a lesson about truth and illusion that the internet should have taught us already. Cameras lie easily, angles flatter, a rented car looks owned, an advance looks like net worth, a borrowed chain shines like a legacy. But reality does not negotiate with framing. Court dates arrive on schedule, bills mature, relationships require showing up, children remember who did and who didn't. When the truth comes due, it does not take the offer you make, it takes what it is owed. All of this leaves a final uncomfortable question hanging in the air. If the goal was to become a living legend, what is left when the legend rots? The catalog exists, the numbers are recorded, but the story around those numbers, what they meant, how they were earned, the cost of keeping them high, redefines the art in retrospect. Songs that once sounded like dominance now sound like foreshadowing. Brags read like confessions. Flexes read like cries for help. It didn't have to end this way. There were exits off the highway, a genuine apology that preceded a long, quiet stretch of responsibility, a commitment to private repair rather than public spectacle, a decision to reject the proximity to violence that made for great thumbnails, but terrible futures. Each exit passed as the needle moved deeper into the red. The tank ran on fumes, then on denial, then on debt. Looking back, the climb and the fall share a single trait: speed. Viral comes fast, consequences come faster. The problem is not that he chased attention. The problem is that he believed attention could substitute for character, that it could buy back the moments when the right choice looked hard and the wrong choice looked cool, that it could erase the memory of those who were harmed, whether in a club, a home, or a courtroom. History will file his story as a case study in internet-age celebrity, how spectacle can be engineered, how loyalty can be parlayed into clout, and how the same mechanics that create a star can, with one decision, become the gears that grind that star into dust. The internet was not the villain, it was the amplifier. It turned whispers into roars and then turn those roars back on their source. Today the cameras still turn on, but the frame is different. The audience may show up out of habit, out of curiosity, out of love for chaos. They watch, they comment, they scroll away. A fan base that once defended anything now negotiates with its conscience. Brands that once saw upside now see risk. Peers who once tolerated the noise now refuse to collaborate. Institutions, courts, agencies, labels hold the file and add pages. Behind the posts and the push notifications, there is a quieter reality. A person wakes up and calculates who to call, what to film, where to go that still says, "I'm here." The numbers that once set records now set quotas. How much attention is needed to cover how many obligations? The math gets harder, the breath gets shorter, the silence after the upload gets longer. And somewhere outside the frame, families try to build normal days. Children grow whether parents show up or not. Mothers budget and improvise. Holidays come and go. Reporters reach out. Lawyers draft. Judges schedule. The story that the world watches is only one layer. Beneath it is the story that matters more and will outlast every headline. There is a future available to anyone willing to do the long work. Healing, restitution, accountability, humility. It is not exciting. It does not trend. It births no memes. It makes no sizzle reel. It is the only path that closes the gap between persona and person. Whether he ever takes it cannot be answered in a video or a post. It can only be answered in years of choices that most people will never see. So this ends where it should, not with a cheer or a jeer, not with a stunt or a sob story, but with a mirror. The reflection is crowded. Fame, fear, ambition, grief, arrogance, need, hunger, love, anger, and the hollow echo of applause that came too easily for too long. The mirror doesn't lie. It shows a kid who found a shortcut, sprinted, and then learned what shortcuts cost. It shows a man surrounded by the invoices of his own decisions. It shows the truth that the internet always reveals too late. The numbers were never the point. The life was. He climbed because he understood how to get noticed. He fell because he never learned what to do with the attention once he had it. If there is a second act, it won't be written in views. It will be written in responsibilities finally met, debts finally paid, relationships finally repaired, and a voice that finally discovers what it sounds like without the need to shout. Until then, the legend remains a lesson, and the lesson remains the same. Fame without foundation is a house built on sand, and storms do not care how many people watched you build it. He once promised that he would be seen. Now the only promise that matters is whether he will be worth seeing.